Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Commerce Lab by Ecomcy, the place of editor related to Amazon FBA Private Level and e-commerce. My name is Vincenzo Toscano, founder and CEO of Ecomcy, and today we bring you for second time very close friend of mine, Yoni Kozminski, who is the co-founder and CEO of two companies. Actually, we have MultiplyMii, which specializes on everything that has to do with creating high-performing teams to scale your business forward, and Scala, that is all about creating those systems that can make the difference between bringing your business to the next level or not. And that's why I wanted to bring Johnny today, because I know building systems and teams is effectively the most important thing that your company can do, because otherwise you end up working in the business rather than on the business. And that's unfortunately something I see a lot in the community. People get stuck into their daily operations. They really are very afraid to hire, people on board, or creating system that they can detach from the business 1 week and they're not gonna go bankrupt, right? So that's all the things we're gonna be discussing on today's episode. So Johnny, pleasure to have you on the show today. How you doing, my bro?
Vincenzo, it is a pleasure. I could sit and listen to you talk all day. I'm sad that I have to answer questions. I think, yeah, I was saying to you beforehand, but honestly, mate, it's always good to see you, and it's great to hopefully add some value to those who listen in today.
Thank you, bro. Every single time we meet at events, I always say, I appreciate so much what you've been doing in the space. I feel the value you're bringing, first and most, is one of the things that sellers struggle so much, man. I'm sure you have these conversations every single day. Sellers are very afraid to let their baby start walking on its own, right? Like building something around that thing that they built from scratch, that they can go and do our ventures or launch an Amazon business. And that's the reality. Most of them don't grow. And I even feel it as an agency when I have this conversation with sellers. They're really scared to let people come on board and really bring the expertise. So that's something I really want to go deeper today. But before we do that, for those that might not know you, give us a quick intro about the wonderful Yoni and all your amazing background. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say the topic that you outlined, it's really one of the hardest things for people to make that mental shift of how do I let people in to
Mhm.
accelerate my growth as opposed to taking more on, and that's sort of the perpetual entrepreneurial struggle. So I'm excited to dive into that, why you should listen to me, and why it's going to be relevant in terms of the answers and the things we're going to be discussing. Personally, I spent 10 years in creative advertising and digital
Mhm.
marketing, working with Sony, MasterCard, Mercedes-Benz, Medtronic, big companies, and then came into the e-commerce and Amazon space on the back of sort of seeing what, it's at the pinnacle of that type of work looks like. Today, MultiplyMii, to give you guys a little bit of a snapshot, internally we have 100 full-time team members. So we grew as a bootstrap company to managing a lot of people, and like everyone listening in who's trying to make that considered jump, I had to also learn very quickly what it is to relinquish degrees of control while still staying in control of the direction of the business. MultiplyMii has placed over 1,000 people into e-commerce and Amazon brands since its inception. We're placing circa 30, 40 people every single month into other companies. So, we've built that machine, and that's really what we hope to achieve for others, is to do what we've done, but for yourselves. And then Scala, process improvement, management consulting. We go in, and Vincenzo, you really outlined it. We help build those systems that enable you to get out of your business by building SOPs, documentation, accountability, and org charts. And obviously the two go well together, because if we can help you understand where to
Brilliant.
drive to, and then we can help bring in high value, low cost talent, we talk a lot about it, at least internally, but it's about building profitable businesses. This isn't
Exactly.
about building a business that is reliant on a 6, 7, 8, 9, 15-figure revenue
Mm.
number. That's all nonsense if you're not bringing home, the bacon, as they say.
Mm.
So anyway, that's enough about me. Let's give the people what they want, and let's dive in.
Yeah, of course. And I think to conclude on what you just mentioned, the reason why they're also so perfectly aligned, and this has happened to me. Sometimes you can bring A players to the business, but then if you bring A players to your business and they don't really understand first and most, like what are your processes, your culture, how you deal with things on a daily basis, you're lacking the systems and the process internally. That A player can eventually go from being an A player to not really performing at the level that you wanted him to perform. And also not only from the moment of integrating the person, it's like if you don't build the systems and processes, I feel then once you start hiring people more and adding more people internally, you always have that hamster kind of running on the wheel a scenario where people come, you have to train them from scratch, then you have to divert yourself from important things because you don't have a system in place, and it's a never ending nightmare. So I'm sure we're going to be talking all about that today. So first thing, so we can start with first like like an intro to this topic for all those Amazon sellers watching and hearing us today. How do you go first and most in terms of making that initial decision that you need a new A player or you need systems in your business? Because I feel maybe when you're getting started, it's not maybe the right moment to do so. But how you identify I'm at that stage that I need more people in my team and I need a system around that. Yeah.
Yeah, great opener there. I would say the first thing that I want to call out is that, up until a certain point when you're starting to figure out a business, it's totally fine for you to be a solopreneur
Mm-hmm.
working
Yeah.
in your business. You want to figure things out. So, for anyone listening, it's not freak out. We need to hire someone tomorrow. The reality is, I would say, even to give you, like, again, I don't like talking revenue numbers all that much as an indicator, but to keep it simple and to speak in
Yep.
the common language here, somewhere between 0 to 500,000, even up to 1 million, you could comfortably get away with being
Mm-hmm.
a solopreneur and being able to touch on a lot of the things that happen, assuming you're not a super high volume
Mm-hmm.
product that requires a lot of customer support, as an
Mm-hmm.
example. And especially if you're leveraging, resources like Ecomcy and external agencies, you can still be able to run your business and do
Exactly.
the critical things. I would say as you go beyond that point, call it 2 to 3 million, it becomes
Start.
very hard to get your hands around everything. And so you either have to go through leveraging lots of external providers, which even still is going to require roles like project management or someone to make sure that you're actually on track. But coming back to making that decision, which was the question that you asked, is that one, the great equalizer in life is time. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how good of an entrepreneur you are, we all have the same amount of time. Even if you're putting in your 18 hours a day, which I highly advise against, because sooner or later you're going to get burnout. Um,
Yeah.
you only have so much time. So the first thing you need to really do is you need to assess and say, how am I spending my time? Where am I adding value in the business? And where are the things that could potentially be handled by someone else? A really simple thing that people can do is block time in your calendar. Look at how you're investing your time. If I'm, obviously here we're on a podcast having a conversation, it's in my calendar. But even the things that I'm working on my own, I'm blocking them off. I have them color coded. Google has a free, ability to
Yeah.
tag, whether it's strategy or partnerships or
Mm.
product development or keyword research or whatever it is that you're working on. What you should do is look at how you're spending your time and then look at the things that say, does it need to be me? Keyword
Yeah.
research. If you build a framework on what is relevant keyword research for new product development, as an example, then if you can say, well, these are the types of tools that I'm using, this is how I operate, really look and sort of grade your week and say, one is something that really doesn't need to be me involved. 5 needs to be me. I need to be the final decision maker, as an example of what product goes live. So if you look at how you're spending your time, you overlay that with the importance of it needing to be you. And then for the things that are 1s and 2s and potentially 3s, you can look and you can say, right, these are the things that actually make sense for me to delegate. I would say make sure that you bundle them, as an example, into things that are not like design work and development
Yeah.
work and doing finances. That's not going to be the same person.
Yeah.
But keyword research, PPC management, as an example, if this is something that you're still not at a stage where you're bringing an external provider, or it's still relatively small, those are the types of skill sets that would be uniform and you could bundle together and then look to hire. And I would say, obviously, you need to look at your cash position. You need to know that you can actually afford to
Yeah.
bring someone in. And, that's obviously why I've seen success as a bootstrap founder in growing to where we're at today is because you can find resources, particularly at that junior and even up to middle management level, that can actually perform high value deliverables without having to bring someone on that's 6 figures.
Exactly, exactly. I think one of the things I first want to bring to the table is the fact that I like the way you described that at the beginning is good and that you can bootstrap everything yourself, because I feel sometimes if you don't do that and you don't go through all the different areas that your business might need to effectively operate as a company, you then don't really understand what usually has to be done from a marketing perspective, from sales perspective, from a PPC perspective, graphic design. And if you don't have some basic understanding of all these things that at the beginning you have to do yourself, then how you even in the first place are gonna hire a person, right? Because you sometimes don't know what are some of the tasks look like, what are some of the limitations, what are some of your weaknesses, and try to find your weakness as strengths in our people. And beyond that, you mentioned the cash flow side of things, which I would like to go a little bit deeper into that, because I feel when you go about hiring this next person that can come on board, sometimes people don't also understand what is their worth in terms of time. This is a question a lot of people don't make themselves. Like, what is my hourly rate, right? Let's say your hourly rate is, maybe you can help me here, like is 100 dollar per hour. Like, what can I afford to basically delegate this to a person that it will cost me less, so I can actually focus on high level decisions while I basically remove some of the admin work out of the plate, right?
So that's a really great way to frame it, Vincenzo.
Mm,
And I think that the way that anyone who's looking at, so what you're calling out, just to call it very bluntly, is a lot of entrepreneurs don't value their time as a
exactly.
valuable resource, right?
Hmm.
And so what we're trying to do is assess, what is my time actually worth? How
Hmm.
you can actually figure out what your time is worth is when you go through that process and you time block and you look at what you're doing and you even review and you say, right, that was a really valuable meeting, or I did 5 hours of work on product development that I was really passionate about, and I was able to launch two new products, you know, in 3 months' time. Obviously, the
Hmm.
supply chain, logistics, getting
Hmm.
it. The,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, there's a lot of work that goes into actually getting a product live. But looking at your investment and your involvement, and then you need to ask yourself, right, the simplest example I can give you in terms of how you can assess the value of your time as it relates to an e-commerce founder is that we all know when it comes to marketplaces, specifically Amazon, launching new products is one of the most critical things that you need to continue to do in order to grow your business and to grow your revenue and your profitability and to prevent, competitors from creeping in and seeing what you're up to. So coming back to it, ask yourself the question, what is it worth for me from both a revenue perspective, a profitability perspective? If I only launched one product this year and it generated $1 million, what would it look like if all I did was I spent my time focused on launching 50 products next year, right? And so when you start to question, what is my hourly rate? Well, what would it actually take for you to
Yeah.
focus on the things that you're the best at? And what would that yield as a revenue profits perspective? And that's how you should be making the decisions and saying, if I am not getting to this, then I am
Hmm.
not growing in this part. And so that's where you can do it. So even coming back to sort of the cash position, and I'm not advising take on enormous debts here, but
Yeah.
if you're looking at it from an opportunity cost perspective, spending $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month on a couple of resources potentially,
Makes
um,
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
it can rapidly shift your trajectory as a business. So don't look at it from a really short-sighted lens and saying, well, because I can do it, I should do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've seen that happening to me, especially the last couple of months. I started to let a lot of things out of my plate, which at the beginning I wasn't doing because I was having this um, feeling, which I feel that's what most Amazon sellers feel, the ones here and watching this episode, that they feel like if they let things go, first of all, they feel other people cannot do such a good job as you do. And also you start feeling that you lose control in terms of the direction the business is going to go, because you feel nobody is going to love your business as much as you do, which is true. But at the same time, again, when you can find these A players that can come on board, and I feel that completely shifted, the speed and scale I managed to achieve. So now at the same time, though, one of the things I started to implement, and I would like to also hear your take on this, is effectively what you mentioned, which is finding this junior mid-tier kind of talent that yes, maybe they are not at the level of enterprise in terms of being employees that you can bring on board, but they're very hungry. They are looking to learn. They're really passionate about what they do, and effectively, the only thing they're missing sometimes is a strong systems and processes that they can just copy into their daily routine, and that's how they become a player. So tell us a little bit about that methodology you briefly mentioned at the
So
beginning.
you're really striking a chord, and I say that because I literally, before jumping on this with you,
Mhm.
posted that I'm hiring for the first time in over a year here locally for a revenue operations
Mm.
specialist, and I was really intentional about it being 1 to 4 years of experience and
Junior.
not
Yeah.
10 plus years experience. And I would say it's for a couple of reasons. Senior people, if you can afford them and they come and bring in expert knowledge that you don't have, massively valuable. Like, let's not discredit that. But with that also comes downsides as well, in that they've learned a certain way, they have a way of operating, and, you know, it's not necessarily always the best way. So there's pros and cons even with senior people. But
Mm-hmm.
coming back to it, if you have effective onboarding, if it is very clear, if you can bring someone on and they understand the business very clearly, the value proposition, if they understand, as an example, how we operate internally, we run on a loosely on a methodology called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And in that,
Mm-hmm.
as part of it, we set out our 1 year plan, our 3 year goal, our 10-year vision. We're setting every single quarter specific goals that are attached to our business goals and objectives. We do it over a 6 month time frame. So we do first half, second half of the year. Every single team member inside of every single function inside of the business understands where they're driving towards. So I share all of this in saying that if you can bring that clarity, both from where we're trying to get to at a company
Mm-hmm.
level, department level, and individual level, from a role perspective and accountability, and you can take it one step further and build performance metrics that align with them achieving those goals, then you can bring in much more junior people because they have a very clear operating environment. They understand what's expected of them. What's
Yeah.
more is that they can be brought up to speed very, very quickly, and you effectively bring the entire ecosystem internally together. So coming back to, sort of these mid-tier people, you can bring a C player into your business that shows a lot of potential, the hunger, the passion, the desire. These are the things for this role that I'm looking for. Those are the things that are much more important to me.
Yeah.
That
Of
they
course.
that they have that desire, and so yeah. So all that I'm sort of saying here
Yeah.
is that if you can give them the information, if you can give them the guidance and direction, and give them general parameters, because what you don't want to do, just to show the other example, is it is counterintuitive to me, even when you talk about remote talent, to build a task list and say, do this,
Mhm.
then do
Yeah.
this, then do this, then do this, because ultimately you're still going to be the person accountable
Exactly.
at the end of that task list. As soon as it's finished, yes, boss, I've finished. Now
It's like a
what?
bot. It becomes a bot at that stage. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. That's actually, I might take that, because that's exactly what it is. You're trying to build human bots.
Yeah. 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 And I think another thing I have figured out that it happens as well. Um, Usually, and this is just to give an example that maybe is gonna resemble with a lot of people. For those that watch football, or those in the US soccer, you're gonna find a lot of times these teams that bring all these A players into a single team, and they don't perform very well together because they have all their way of thinking. They have very robust already way of playing X, Y, and Z. But then you see other teams that all they did was preparing these deep players in from very young age, and they started to build their systems, their culture, and everything, and they play much better as a team. So what I'm trying to say is, in business, I feel sometimes the same. It's much better to bring people that is not as good at the beginning, but then you can mold to, in terms of how you think as an entrepreneur, your culture, your systems, and everything. That sometimes, as you say, bring this A player that is a six-figure salary, but they're very robust. Sometimes they're not very easy to mold around your business. It can create actually some issues if they're not able to adapt very fast because the cash flow intensity that they require. So
The football analogy is a great one. If you bring in a really strong coach that is meticulous in the game plan and a list manager, that can outperform a lot of individual A players
Exactly.
who are not working to a collective goal. And you see that a lot in the Premier League in particular.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Now, talking about systems as well. So of course we've been talking about funding, the A players, and how we can also get some of these juniors and mid-tier players to become A players throughout the journey of the company. But I feel creating systems, it can be also very tough, because sometimes creating a system, especially if you are into a growth phase, they are very dynamic. This system can shift in matters of months, right? Because you keep learning, especially with how fast the e-commerce space is evolving. Especially Amazon, every single Monday is a new strategy, a new way of ranking, a new way of doing listing, a new way of doing images. So it's like the system can become very obsolete very fast, right? So what is your advice here? Like how I can keep up with this? Because if it's otherwise, I would be always need to go back to the drawing board, and by the time I finish I need to do another system. You see what I mean? So how you
Great.
mitigate that?
You're asking all the right questions, and you're asking the questions of someone who's really learning through their growth in their business. So, having these types of conversations, you always get a good feel of sort of where
Yeah.
someone's at, and you're quite evolved in your thinking of how you're building a business. So that's just
That's
a small payment to you, and just
thank
giving
you.
you the credit you deserve. Because we get a lot of these questions on a Scala discovery calls,
Mm,
and the advice that I like to share with people is that you shouldn't be building SOPs from day one. Again, just
mm,
like I gave the example of 0 to 1 million, that you can get your hands around a lot of things and manage a lot of things, you should not be trying to document an SOP the first time you're trying to figure things out, because there will be rapid shifts in what's happening. You'll be testing and realizing things don't work. And I think what's important is that usually when you're starting specific functions, core deliverables, projects, it usually starts with one person until you have quite a robust team,
mhm,
or the function is really built out. So waiting to a point where you have something that resembles something that's working is when you should really start to invest and move into it. So I would say, like, to give you sort of a broad stroke time frame,
mhm. True.
within somewhere inside of the first 6 months of service delivery, that is when you should start to really look at at documenting the processes to a meaningful way. And I would look at it in two parts. There's one there's one aspect around process documentation, and then there's like standard operating procedures, which is like the detailed insights. How we approach it is there's like the flow of the business. So, like, if we looked at an agency, um, there's marketing that brings
Mhm,
in marketing qualified leads that eventually
mhm,
become sales qualified leads. Those sales qualified leads would then move into, winning a new client. There's onboarding, then there's the service delivery. So there's a lot of like those types of things you should track, and you should say, what is the actual flow and who's going to be responsible to that level. That you need to understand. Trying
mm,
to document, like, what does client onboarding look like, in a detailed aspect, until you've actually done that with 2 or 3 or 4 clients, and you're at a point where you're like, either I want to start to consider handing off parts of it, or I want to make sure that I'm not the only one working in the business here. That's when you should start to consider going to those next layers and in building that step by step guide.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And I think something I have started to do, and it also has worked, is that when we create these systems across specific tasks, let's say around PPC, right? And then you have sometimes team member that come to you, and this can be also useful for everybody hearing and watching. Like your team start asking you a question, and that question give you a specific outcome that was beneficial but wasn't part of the SOP. They should be also responsible to go back to the SOP and now add this extra question as this question gave me this output, and that output gave me this result in terms of their business, and then start evolving in a dynamic approach, right? Than only having the leader, in this case the owner of the business, being the person responsible for the SOP. Make you also your team accountable to go back to the SOP and give them the freedom to actually add their input, because as we all know, if you have a person that is very hungry and looking to experiment with new things and discover things that you are not even aware that they exist, like they should also have the freedom to I bet interact with those systems, right?
Absolutely. If you can build them to that level, then all
Hmm.
of a sudden you set people free.
Exactly. Hmm.
You allow them, and you I just want to go back to one of the points that you had mentioned earlier about when you get really busy, you're going
Hmm.
through growth, and you have this sort of push pull feeling of that I need to go and onboard this person and I need to give them the information, but I've got all these really
Hmm.
highly important tasks, urgent tasks that are cropping up, and you sort of get stuck in this vacuum of I
Hmm.
can't get them exactly the hamster wheel that you called out
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
where you want to help them get up to speed, but you're getting pulled into everything that you're trying to do. And if you're able to build effective SOPs, where again, let's say that they're 80% correct, right? They can still come to you for questions and update them and go through that process. But if you can turn not just the SOPs, but you can turn that into a really effective onboarding plan, what does the first 30 days look like? 60 days, 90 days look like? What are the projects that you're going to work on early on to get some quick wins? What does the structure look like? How do I get information around the company? How do I systematically approach going from being a whatever account manager, a junior account manager who has no experience, to running multi-million dollar accounts and doing things at a really high level? If you're able to give them that information in a way whereby you are not the one who has to deliver all of the information, then you're able to focus on those important tasks and potentially urgent tasks without needing to get drawn back in each and every time someone new comes on, especially if you have high turnover. I mean, you're going to be stuck on that hamster wheel forever.
Yeah, I know. I know. Now, to start concluding, and this is something I'm sure people might be wondering, like in the hiring process, you that have done so much hiring and you specialize on this finding A players. If you have to choose one question or one skill that you will say is really something that a person must have to come on board your team, what would that question or that skill be? Like, is something that is not a non-negotiable for you?
So I want to give you something that can be sort of universally applied to any role,
Yeah, yeah,
and and the things that I would ask in terms of questions. I'll give you a few questions
yeah,
that
yeah.
I
Of course.
think can build together to help you. But you know, I'm going to assume here that you've thought through and you've said, okay, this is what the business needs as a new role.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're aligned on that this new role is going to serve this purpose. So you've worked backwards from what does the business need to fitting in, and not the other way around. So you haven't just
Mm-hmm.
hired someone because you like them, but you've thought through and said the business needs this.
Yeah.
And then you're going through the process and you're interviewing multiple candidates, and it's very clear you've seen the skills that they have. They seem aligned with what you're trying to hire for. You've taken the time to actually get on this call with them. So just setting the table, setting the stage, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, so that we're all speaking the same language. If they have worked in that previous role, and this is, let's say they were a junior account manager, you have a senior account manager, or they're a keyword researcher, and now they want to be brand manager, whatever the sort of the growth of the transition is, or it's the same role like for like. The question, one of the questions that I think is really important that you ask is that you ask them, so you want to separate two things. One is you don't want to give them too much information up front as to what you're looking for, because you want people to actually speak first and tell
Exactly.
you about what they are excited about, what they are passionate about. And so what I like to ask as a question is I'll ask them, in your previous role, what were the things that you are most proud of? What are the things that you were most excited about? And they'll tell you,
Mm-hmm.
about the things that they felt were their achievements and the things that they liked and that they were hungry to, they are hungry to do more of and they want to grow into. Because in every reality, they see a job, they're looking for a job, maybe it doesn't 100% align with what it is that they want to be doing, but it's an opportunity for right now. You want to make sure that the person you're bringing into the role is passionate about what you are actually offering and what you are trying to build in your company. And so if you let them talk about what they saw as their achievements and what was exciting for them in that previous business, you can already make that connection and say they are actually someone who's going to be passionate about what they're building towards. So I think that that's a
Nice.
universal style question that you can get some deep insights. and
Yeah.
and I would say another question on that same sort of framing or that same logic is, if they had a manager, which in most cases they would have, right? I would ask the question, what would your manager say are your biggest strengths and your
Mm,
biggest weaknesses? And just from a
yeah.
psychology standpoint, there's a shift that happens when, one, they might be the referee. So you might, I would say, as a side note, you should go
Yeah.
and follow up and see if they have good self awareness. But there's something that happens when you ask someone what someone else would think about them. They are looking at it from a lens of someone else. And so it makes them more introspective in not just trying to say, you're in an interview. You're trying to, you as the interviewee, you're selling them the world. You're hot shit. You're the best thing on planet Earth, and no one else should get this role, right? So
Yeah.
it's just a nice way to sort of separate where they think about it a little bit more clearly. And you also have the ability to then follow up in your reference checks with that manager to see what they say about that. So there's a
Love
couple of
it.
questions for you.
That's good. Yanni, no better way to end today's episode. So thank you so much for all your knowledge and insights. So in case people want to work with you with Multiply and Scale, I know you specialize on all of these we've been discussing today. So how people can reach out and work with you?
Yeah. You can always take a look at our websites, MultiplyMii, spelled with an M-I-I, me.com, or weareescala.com. Both of them will take you to the most valuable person. I'm pretty available on LinkedIn. If there's something you want to reach out to me, you can find Yoni, Yoni, at either of those email addresses will get me to.
Thank you, Yanni. I'm gonna make sure to put all the information down in the description. Other than that, it's been a pleasure as usual, and can't wait to see you soon upcoming event, bro. Yeah, thank you so much.
Likewise, mate. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.